Thank you for your interest in the Community and Academic Allergist Partnership in Education and Research Program and for considering submitting an application under the program. This presentation will give you a better understanding of what we're looking for in a strong application and help you make a compelling case for your proposed project. At the end of this session, you will have an understanding of how to meet the grant review criteria, assemble your project team, develop your budget, and avoid common mistakes. We'll be awarding up to $100,000 in grant funding in 2025. And we're looking for proposals that focus on practice-based translational research that addresses clinically relevant questions. This program is designed for a collaboration between academic and private practice research teams. So you'll be expected to have both an academic and a community allergist as your principal investigators. This is a great opportunity to initiate research where other sources of grant funding would be difficult to obtain if you don't have preliminary data. So great opportunity for some seed grants. The letter of intent is due on December 1st, so be sure to make a note of this deadline. We will not accept LOIs after this date. You will find more information on the college's member website at college.acaai.org/CA2PER. To apply, both the academic and the community allergist PIs must be members of the college in good standing and practice in the US or Canada. Fellows in training can serve as PIs, but they can be part of your research team. Now, we're looking for projects that are relevant to clinical practice and have the potential to have a positive change in the practice of allergy and asthma. So we are looking for projects that are benefiting the specialty and could potentially be replicated by other research teams and other practices. The program focuses exclusively on translational research with emphasis on T2, T3, and T4 studies, which I'll describe on the next slide. And we'll be giving special consideration to projects that offer new insights into adult onset of allergic mast cell-mediated diseases. There are three types of translational research studies that we will consider under the program: T2, T3, and T4. T2 look at clinical effectiveness, so assessing the value of applying clinical trial research to health practice. Some examples are phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trial and controlled studies that lead to clinical application and evidence-based guidelines. T3 focus on implementation and dissemination research. Some examples are comparative effectiveness research, post-marketing studies, clinical outcomes, and health services research. And T4 evaluate the real-world health outcomes of population health, so translation to communities. And some examples include policy analysis and evaluation, cost-benefit analysis, and surveillance studies. Now, before you get started, make sure that you know what's been done already and why there's a need for your proposed research. We're looking for projects that generate new insights in clinical practice. Know what resources are available to you to support you. And this is especially true in the partnership that you're establishing between the academic and private practice, and each group should be bringing something unique to the table. Make sure that you understand what's required from you, and I can't emphasize this enough, but please read the funding opportunity announcement very carefully to make sure that you're meeting all the requirements. And give yourself enough time to develop your proposal. You'll need to have your letter of intent due to us on December 1st. And if you're selected to submit full proposal, you'll be given about 45 days to develop and submit that full proposal. So make sure you understand what's expected and be sure to adhere to those deadlines. So let's talk a little about the review criteria that you will need to address in your proposal and that our reviewers will look for when reviewing your application. The first is significance. You need to make sure that you are addressing an important problem or challenge that's being faced by fellow allergists. You need to have clear, reasonable, and measurable goals. The second, innovation. Really, we're seeking proposals that shift the current clinical practice by utilizing novel concepts, approaches, and intervention. Kind of goes to the earlier point of making sure that you're doing something that hasn't been done before and brings new insights into the practice of allergy and immunology. Next is your approach. In your methodology, we want to make sure that what you describe is well reasoned and appropriate, and that you have a solid plan for achieving your goals and objectives. We also want to make sure that your proposal clearly specifies how you plan to address potential challenges within your project period. As far as the environment is concerned, kind of going back to sort of the core of the partnership between the academic and private practice allergists, want to make sure that there are sufficient resources and that resources are shared between your two research teams to successfully implement the project. We also want to make sure that there's institutional and community support, and that, you know, the support extends to both your academic and private practice setting. Our reviewers are also going to be looking at the qualifications of your research team, and we just want to be sure that you have adequate expertise to carry out your proposed research, and that the individual members of your teams have the qualifications to essentially take on the roles that you specify in the proposal. Budget. It needs to be realistic. One big advice I will give you is don't ask for more than you need. Be realistic. Do your research into what certain aspects of your study are going to cost, and make sure that you have an adequate justification for each of your expenses. And finally, partnership. We touched upon that a few times, about that MPI, multiple principal investigator model, with one PI being academic and one being community or private practice, is very important for this particular program. And we also want to make sure that you're able to demonstrate adequate distribution of responsibilities between all the organization involved. And again, sort of an equal partnership between your academic and private practice allergists. So in addition to addressing the review criteria, there are a few other ways that you could really strengthen your grant application. Make sure that, you know, the ideas are of innovative and novel nature, and address patient care in a translational format. That you have a clinical application that leads to improvements and positive change in the practice of allergy on a national scale. We're looking for ways that this project could potentially serve as a model for other practices or other research teams. So that will be something that we'll be looking at when reviewing our proposals. We also want to look at ways that your project can help improve the future system of care for allergy and asthma patients. And again, reasonable evidence of being replicable and used by potentially other research teams in the future. As you assemble your research team, again, make sure that you have at least one academic and one private practice principal investigator, and both of your investigators are members of the college. Ensure that your team has a credential and experience to be able to carry out the work that you're proposing. And also make sure that you look for additional support from outside entities when you need them, be it for human subject protections or getting into the community, getting access to patients or special populations. We don't require letters of support for the proposal, but certainly if you have them from your collaborating organizations, that would be a plus to your application. Now let's talk a little bit more about your budget. And this is something that you will have to go into a little bit more detail when you develop your full proposal. In the letter of intent itself, we're just asking for the total amount that you need. So you will have a little bit of time after you submit your letter of intent if you are selected to develop your budget in more detail. But you can request up to $100,000. We may or may not give you the entire $100,000. We may select a number of good projects and divide up the $100,000 that we have allocated for the program. But again, as I mentioned earlier, just ask for what you need for your project. And it could very well be a smaller scale project that will help you collect the preliminary data that you need to potentially seek additional funding to expand your project. So this could very well be a seed grant that helps you get started. Understand what expenses can be covered. Again, read the funding opportunity notice in great detail to see what is and isn't allowed. Be sure to justify all the items that you're including in your budget. Don't pad your budget. Don't add expenses that you don't need just to come up with a full $100,000 figure, for example. Demonstrate that what you're proposing is cost effective. If there are in-kind contributions, if there are resources that are being dedicated to the project that are not costing you any funding, that's always nice to see. And as I mentioned, don't pad the budget, only ask for what you need. So here are some things that we don't fund under the CA2PER program. We don't provide salary support to your investigators. We could provide some funding, for example, if you need statistical support or you're paying someone for services, you could build that into your budget. Projects that are already fully funded, we're not going to consider when you already have another source of funding. We don't fund scholarships under the program or any type of activities that will fall either under religious or political purposes. We also don't provide grants for fundraising. And the indirect costs that are usually paid to the institution that administers the grant are limited to 10% of the total grant amount. So be sure to keep that in mind. So the first step in submitting an application is to go ahead and put together a letter of inquiry, which is due on December 1st. The letter of inquiry is submitted online, so be sure to look at the funding opportunity notice for a link to the online form. We're not asking for a full proposal just yet, but you should be able to answer a few basic questions about the project that you're proposing. Namely what challenges you're going to be addressing, why you and your research team is qualified to conduct this research, specify your goals and objectives and what you hope to achieve through your project, what your approach and methodology will be to achieve these goals, and how much funding you will need to cover these activities. So altogether, the letter of inquiry is limited to about 1,000 words. So this is just a brief synopsis of your project. And again, if you'll be invited to submit a full proposal, you'll be asked to elaborate on each of these areas in much more detail for the full proposal. So here are some common mistakes to avoid. First and foremost, not reviewing the funding opportunity announcement, not providing all the required information, not addressing the review criteria, and not really understanding what the focus or purpose of the grant program is. and most importantly, missing the deadline. I think I mentioned before that we will not be considering proposals that are submitted after December 1st deadline. So here's an overview of the application process and timeline. So the letter of intent is due December 1st of 2024, and within 2 weeks, by December 16th, you'll be notified if you've been selected to submit a full proposal. You will then be given about 45 days or so to develop your full proposal, which will be due to us January 31st of 2025. We expect award notifications to go out at the end of February, so February 28th, and we would anticipate the projects to start on April 1st of 2025. And that will be for a 12-month project. So your first report, a progress report, will be due in 6 months, so in October. And then a final report would be due about 2 months after the end of the project, so at the end of May of 2026. Well, thanks again for your interest in the CAPER grant opportunity. I am happy to answer any questions you may have, so please don't hesitate to contact me. I can be reached by email or by phone, and you can see both listed here on the slide. And I also encourage you to visit the CAPER page on the college's member website at college.acai.org/CAPER. You'll find all the information that you need there, the funding opportunities, and links to all the different forms that you would need for your grant proposal submission. So we look forward to seeing your grant proposal. And again, don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions.